Hello, everyone. Welcome to Taking a Break with Gen X Jace and Boomer 2. We're here on a Friday afternoon doing a podcast. I was lucky to be off this week. Just got back from Ohio, and while my teams went 0-2, I had a hell of a time. How you doing, Boomer?
I'm doing great. It's been a while since I've been to Ohio, but that had to be a rough weekend for you. You're a big St. Louis Cardinals fans. The Reds beat them. Texas played Ohio State. That didn't go well. And I feel sorry for Arch Manning because Arch Manning, everybody thinks he's the Messiah, but he's still a young kid starting his first game. Uh, you know, it always starts a little rough. Peyton Manning, all the big ones started with rough stretches in the beginning, but don't don't fall off of Arch Manning. I think he's going to be great.
Well, the thing about the game is that everybody in Ohio was nice. Of course, I was wearing I get to the age of my life where I don't really wear people's names on my back. I just get the generic jersey, if anything, my jersey. I kind
Yeah,
of learned that the hard way when a few years ago was in Busch Stadium and I got a Albert Pujols jersey, paid the money and stuff. And then after that 2011 World Series fucker left, went to the Angels. I didn't burn it like a lot of idiots do. I just took it to Goodwill and gave it. But I haven't really bought a jersey since then. So I got the number one generic one. And after I ordered it, I was thinking, shit, I should have got me an Earl Campbell jersey because I mean
yeah,
he's
no
older than
shit.
me, great player. But I saw a lot of Arch Manning's jerseys there, and there were quite a bit of Texans fans there. But I had no one talk shit to me from Ohio State till I got back to San Antonio. I
Wow.
was I was in the bathroom and I was wearing my of course it was cooler up in Detroit where I was coming from, and I get back here to the furnace in Texas, and I got my Texas hat on and my Texas pullover on, and I had a guy in the bathroom go, OH, Of course, I had a little kid in front of me doing it the whole time, but he was just happy to be there. And I was like, hey, bro, you're back in Texas, take that shit off, and just had to talk a little shit. But it's typical media. They built up Arch, to be the second coming of, shit, Tom Brady. And
Yeah.
now they're tearing him down. You have a lot of fans turning on him and shit. He came alive in that second half. And if they would have started playing like that before, it was a winnable game for them. But hands off to Ohio State. Our defense is supposed to be the best. We had some calls on there that didn't go our way. As we're recording this, I had to watch the Cowboys lose last night too. So I'm over 3 right now on my fucking teams. And that was an ugly kind of game with little spitting going on. It just shows the classness of, people. I'm not a big Dak Prescott fan, but they're trying to give him a lot of shit for spitting in the ground. But that guy from Philadelphia I guess he was involved in auto racing and I think killed somebody and is lucky to be in the league. Well, he was coming over to the Cowboys huddle, so he shouldn't have been over in the fucking first place. And Philly, I mean, they blew Santa Claus. They cheered when Michael Irvin got hurt. So Philly's not I think Jalen Hurts is great. I like certain players. But yeah, Ohio State was great. The Cardinals are the Cardinals. What got me about the Cardinals and made me feel real fucking old. A lot of these players are just starting their MLB career back in the end of August. It's like, wow. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't know half those guys because I haven't really been keeping up. But there's a guy on the Reds, De La Cruz. He's a young guy. He wears 4'4". He's got dreadlocks. That motherfucker's fast. He was already on second. His dreads were still on first. I mean, that motherfucker was fast. And I think the Reds have a real chance because they're above the Cardinals. They have a real chance of building on somebody. The Cardinals haven't been the same since Tony La Russa left. When he left, and they hired Mike Matheny. Terry Francona was there that coached the Red Sox who applied for the Cardinals back then. I wish they would have given it to him then. But since Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols are gone, Adam Wainwright, Cardinals are just kind of a dumpster fire. But I think the Reds have a solid future. Brewers are always good. Cubs are, as much as I hate to say it, Cubs are good. But I mean, yeah, I went 0-2, but it was a hell of a time, man. I mean, the Cardinals are one game from sweeping, and they fuck up the one I'm at.
Well, I tell you what, when you're as old as me, I'm not a Cardinals fan because I'm not from St. Louis or Missouri or anything like that. But there are two times when I knew of the St. Louis Cardinals. It was back in I think in '87 or something when they played the Minnesota Twins on the World Series thing. I remember that. I remember Tom Herr. And this is going back 30 fucking years. But before that, the only thing I knew about the St. Louis Cardinals was Stan Musial. That's fucking old. We're talking 50s, 60s. I want to tell you a story about wearing a jersey to a game. I like the fact that Ohio State was kind to you when you went to the game. In our state, we have a big rivalry with Wisconsin. Okay. Minnesota Gophers, Wisconsin Badgers. Now, my wife is a big Minnesota Gopher football fan. I'm not. I mean, I don't hate them. I like watching them, but I don't get too excited about them. And people say, why aren't you excited about the Gopher football team this year? I said, well, the last time they won the national championship was the fucking year I was born. Since then, they've been mediocre, literally mediocre, maybe a couple of good years here and there. So, what's to get excited about? I've never seen them go off and go on a tear and go into the championship rounds or the national championship. Anyway, my wife says, let's take the kids to a Gopher game in Wisconsin. Okay, now Wisconsin, you go to their field, they're drinking, they're pretty intense about their shit. So so we say, okay, we're going to take our two sons. One's 11, one's 10, one's 5 or something like that, the little one, okay? So we go, we get in the stands, but before we go there, my wife starts putting jerseys on the boys. I go, don't do that. Don't put the jerseys on the boys. She goes, "Oh, come on now. What do you expect? They're little kids. Nobody's going to give them a hard time."
I
So we go sit in the stands, and there's a drunken fuck behind us, okay? He's got his wife with him, and she seems embarrassed. And I got my wife and I and my two boys sitting there. Minnesota Gophers do something good. My 5-year-old son stands up in his little jersey, goes, "Yeah, Gophers." And the guy behind me says, "Sit the fuck down, you fucking asshole." That's what he says to a 5-year-old kid. Now I'm starting to turn, and everybody says, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "I'm going to wait till my wife gets done because she'll fuck this guy up. She's climbing over the fucking thing. What are you doing?" And finally, his wife said, "That was fucking stupid. Now you got two women." It was just a mess. The funny thing about it is that little boy that's 5 years old is now about 6'3" and 250. I want to go back to Wisconsin and see what the fuck he has to say about it now.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. I was sitting there and I was, of course, surrounded by Ohio State fans, and I had this little kid in front of me kept saying OH, and then everybody IO the whole game, and like in my face. I mean, I was cool with it. I mean, if anything, I've seen my teams lose, I've seen them win. Don't be that guy. You're in somebody else's arena, you're in somebody else's home. Don't be that guy. And I think I learned a lot from Aggie fan, which the Texas Aggies, because they hate Texas because they ain't us, and OU, Oklahoma, because it's what, Mike, 12:45 and OU still sucks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had a gentleman tell me it was weird. I was walking with my mom, and that was the hardest thing is when you're kind of older and you have hip problems, you got to go up those fucking stairs. And that stadium we were with was my mom's boyfriend. He's an alumni from Ohio State, or excuse me, the Ohio State. So I don't follow football but the Cowboys, Longhorns, and UTSA. But I had a friend
Yeah.
of mine ask me, "Hey, is your mom's boyfriend wearing an AJ Hawk shirt, jersey?" And I'm like, "Who the fuck's AJ Hawk?" I mean, I'm not invested in Ohio State. So I found out later he's fucking one of Pat McAfee, who I like, but he's the one that always he played for, I guess, for the Packers that had the one that Aaron Rodgers' buddy came on there. It's like, well, fuck, he's Ohio State and he's a fucking Packer. Of course, I don't know him, you know what I mean? But it's like I don't keep up with football too much, and I don't really keep up with sports too much because it's the one thing that they're you're always setting yourself up for disappointment. It goes from the highest of high, lowest of lows. Like they say, baseball can break your fucking heart.
Yeah.
Ask Cleveland Guardians, Indians back at the time when they were up 3-0 on fucking the Cubs, and the Cubs came back. Look at Cleveland; they've never won. Ohio State's hell of a team, but and the Cavaliers have won. So I get this shit about my Cowboys, and I hear that. I mean, I'm lucky. I've seen all my teams win in my lifetime. I've also seen them get their ass kicked in my lifetime. So it's like what really was the highlight of the trip for me was what's behind me with the King is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was in right on the Erie River or
Right.
lake, whatever it's called. I'm not familiar with. We don't have too many of those down here,
Lake
but
Erie, Lake Erie,
huh?
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie. Okay, that's
It's
it.
one of the Great Lakes.
Yes, it's beautiful. And it was built in opened up in what 1987. First inductee was Chuck Berry. The
Mhm.
King was
And
part of
that's a
that class.
and Chuck Berry is a legit number one entry into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
He's maybe not the first of the first, but I see why they picked him. He kind of started out the commercial aspect of it.
well, what gets me about, I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's got it great. They got it right because it seems no matter what people do, they're in for their music. I mean, it's like the College Football Hall of Fame when, the OJ thing went on, and I'm not condoning what, OJ. They took his fucking Heisman out. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think what he did he didn't kill anybody on the field, not literally anyway. Not like Lawrence Taylor did to Joe Theismann,
Yeah,
But Pete Rose, I mean, you look at the Baseball Hall of Fame, it's a fucking glorified museum. That's all it is. You know, and
yeah,
it,
absolutely.
and I mean, it's Pete Rose. He should have been in a long time ago. I mean, Shoeless Joe Jackson, they found out he didn't know what the hell he was doing. Hell of a baseball player. They already faced that thing in life. Those records should stay. And and when I went to the Cleveland game, Cardinals were big Cleveland fans. And, for obvious reasons, I don't wear a red hat anymore. We won't talk about that, but there's reasons why I don't wear a red hat. But I wore the St. Louis Browns throwback STL, and we know what the St. Louis Browns were. They were
Right.
the league that's not represented in the Hall of Fame up till recently. And they
You're
left,
talking about the Negro Leagues,
yes,
and I
and they
say that because
left,
that's what they're called.
yes. And if there's anything I can do to fight the Red Hat takeover is, take it back like we've talked about. And, they went on to Baltimore and they're now the older Orioles, I believe. But St. Louis at one time had two or three teams. That's how big baseball was there. But the rock and roll, I mean, we actually went to Toledo I forget the name of the place, but it's the place that Jamie Farr from MASH owns. It's
Toledo
a,
Mudhens was the team he touted.
yeah, well, it was a Toledo restaurant that he owns. And they have all these buns, like sandwich buns, signed by everybody. They're signed by, Bill Clinton, Trump, of course, JD Vance, politicians, It's like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but with like it's a hamburger. I forget the name of it. Forgive me.
Don't
And
these things get moldy and rot
well,
after a
they're
while?
yeah, they are, and they're some of them are pretty old because I mean, it's some of them are pretty old because it goes back to like Buddy Hackett and like back then
Wow.
it's been open since 1932. It's been open a while, but Jamie Farr owns it, and I forget the name of it. Forgive me. And but there was I was in a gift shop and this guy had no sense of humor. And I go, what happens when somebody like, OJ Simpson comes in? Do y'all, like his Heisman, do y'all take it out and throw it out? And he goes, oh, OJ never been here. But we still got Bill Cosby on the wall. I was like, oh shit, I didn't see that coming. So I guess hell you are okay with that. So I mean, to me, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gets a lot of shit wrong. And I think, the name a lot of people get hung up on the name, but rock and roll started in Cleveland. Rock and roll is a slang term for fucking. We both know that. It was everything evil. According, I saw the videos of Rock and Roll Must Go, but it all started in Cleveland, and that's why it's there. The name is too iconic for them to change. Well, it should be the Music Hall of Fame. They ain't fucking doing that because rock and roll is iconic, and I've never had a problem with it if you have somebody like Madonna, LL Cool J, because to a lot of people, that's rock and roll. Rock and roll, I think the name is doesn't do it justice. Rock and roll can be anything. Like I think I mentioned on the other podcast how Taylor Swift said something about how Travis Kelce pursued her, and she goes, "That's so metal." And I'm sure a lot of, bald metalheads the same get mad at, people for wearing shirts they've never seen. Ah, it's just taking a that's what it is. But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame started in Cleveland and encompasses all things music. I mean, you may disagree with me on that, but I have no problem with the name. I think they're a little slow. people like Bad Company, a lot of these artists have passed before they get in. But where they get a lot of things wrong, I think they got a lot of things right because they don't exclude anybody. And I think baseball, they're just a bunch of snobs. I think football's got a little bit better, but I think I will defend the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on that, that I think they got a lot of people. There's a lot of people that should be in there, but they got a lot of people in there that deserve to be in there that aren't necessarily rock and roll.
I think rock and roll is more of an attitude than a specific genre. I mean, if you
Yeah.
take about the start of rock and roll would have been in the 50s. The 50s apparently to a lot of people epitomized rock and roll. You got rockabilly, you got Elvis, you got all these people. But then in the 60s, it was still loud and but it wasn't anything like what we had in the 50s. And then the 70s, same thing. I think rock and roll is more of an attitude of the young people of their era. Everybody who comes along has a new version of rock and roll. It's just a name. I mean, you listen to yacht rock stuff, and people might say that's not rock and roll. Well, it kind of is for those people in the late 70s. And
Yes.
what's going on in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, it's a way to quantify music that's popular with the people that are just coming of age. And if you have a problem with that, fuck that. There's a lot of things that might be considered rock and roll and not considered rock and roll, but I don't think you can define it in specific terms. It is what it is.
Yeah, and you talk about, just the roots of rock and roll. I mean, it's always been associated with the devil. And there was
Yeah.
and Robert Johnson, selling his, he supposedly couldn't play a guitar to save his life. And he, comes out and he comes back and he just blowing people away. And there's a movie he's depicted on. It's
Talk about sinners.
yeah, Sinners. It just came out. And if you haven't seen that, watch it. And if you haven't seen I guess what they call it, the extra part after, watch it too, because it's good. It depicts, like, how that music was back then, all that rock and roll. I mean, I think rock and roll helped, kill a lot of I mean, the racism and stuff going on because the white kids were listening to it and it drove their parents fucking nuts. I
Yeah.
mean, don't get you wrong, they can say it's evil and stuff, but they didn't want their kids listening to black music. And you have people like the Beatles, you have people, I mean, Elvis gets a lot of shit for stealing, everybody steals everything like we talked about. But I mean, he put a lot of that stuff on the map. And there's stories about Elvis, how, he's, supported, some of these black artists he grew up with, but you never hear about that. You just hear about him stealing stuff. And was he perfect? No. But like he said, don't judge a man until you walk a mile in his shoes. I mean, I've been to Graceland. I mean, Elvis is way before my time, but I grew up listening to him. It had a store. It had his own section down there. It's all on the first floor, where like the roots of rock started. You got the Stones, you got the Beatles. I mean, you got Robert Johnson, you got Hank Williams in there. Hank Williams Jr., Hank Williams. You got of course, they also had the criticism of rock. They played that thing about the guy breaking the record and oh, it's got to go, and breaking that. I didn't know that vinyl was that damn hard. I mean, it was like, I
Oh,
mean,
they were kind of lacquer and they were thick
yeah,
and hard.
yeah. But what really put a smile on my face is I grew up, and what got me into hard rock and metal. We talked about that before. Is having to watch those anti-rock things. I saw Gene Simmons, going head to head with a pastor, and he knew more about the Bible than because he was studying to be a rabbi. He made these people look stupid, and that made me a Kiss fan, which made me an AC/DC fan. I mean, AC was probably first, but seeing it's kind of like in politics when you see somebody doesn't really stand for anything. It's just all gotcha moments. They try to get you with this, but when you have somebody over here that's actually talking, making sense, that resonates. And that's what got me to it. Music, that's why music's always mattered to me because I went through a lot of shit as a kid, as we all did. But that saved me because that was my motivational speaker. But what really, one of my favorite parts about it, and I know he's spinning in his grave right now, and he's spinning probably in the pits of hell, is Jimmy Swaggart is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow.
There's a video of him going against Ozzy, and we all saw the Ozzy when Ozzy came out with Miracle Man after, he got busted. But, it's all these people that got up there, trying to burn the albums and all that crap. they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I think if anything, it's like John Lennon saying they were more popular than Jesus. Well, I mean, he had a point. So I mean, even the haters are part of the hall, which I think they got right as well.
Well, I always hear about people who say, well, this person stole from this person, that person stole from this person. Um, and there are some cheap ass, weak ass musicians that flat out steal things from people. But I think every generation is inspired by the previous generation. I mean, that's what music does. It inspires
Yeah.
you. Gives you a sense of what's going on. Elvis was inspired by those black artists that white people weren't hearing. So he opened a window for black music, as they called it back then, and he was able to translate it into white music. And as much as black people may be irritated that that he they think he stole it, and I don't think most of them are, he also did expose it to a huger audience. Now, one of the most creative, singular artist you can think of that's more current is Prince. Who's more original than Prince? Nobody's more original in recent times than Prince. I think everybody can agree with that. But what you don't know about Prince, loved Elvis. And when you know he loved Elvis and you take a look at him on stage or you take a look at him in the movie Purple Rain, you can see the influence. You also love Joni Mitchell. You can see the influence of Joni Mitchell. He didn't steal from Elvis. He didn't steal from Joni Mitchell. He was inspired by those things to create something of his own with that influence. And that's what happens in music. That's what's supposed to happen in music. And to say people have stolen things from other people, I mean, it happens, but typically, if I listen to music, I'm inspired with different things. If I watch a news show, I'm inspired to talk about something. It's not meaning I'm stealing from it. I'm saying, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to give my take on it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the influence in rock and roll goes way back, like you said, the blues. And you brought up a name, Leadbelly. And you said you didn't know about Leadbelly. I'm familiar with Leadbelly, but he was like in the 30s, maybe the 40s, and he was a blues artist, and he was very primitive. Guy with a guitar, just singing. Wasn't an outstanding singer, but he had great songs. Leadbelly was influenced by a lot of rock people, like Led Zeppelin, the Beatles to a certain extent, and some other people. But there was a song that Leadbelly wrote and did back in the 40s, maybe probably the 40s, that became a hit when it was done by somebody else in the mid 70s. Do you know what that song is? It's kind of a controversial song, but you hear it on TikTok all the time.
No, I'm sorry, I
It's
don't.
the, oh, I didn't think you would because you're younger than I am. But that song that Lead Belly wrote so many years ago was reproduced in um, mid 70s, maybe late 70s, is one of the more iconic one hit wonders in rock and roll of the 1970s. And that song is Black Betty. Remember that
Oh,
song?
really? That's a
Bam,
cover.
balam, whoa, Black Betty, bam, balam, a damn thing going wild. Yeah, that was written by Lead Belly. Now, when Lead
Wow.
Belly did it, it didn't sound the same as that. It was more low. They took that song, they added some words, and they rocked that shit out, and it became a great song. So that's one absolute evidence where rock and roll, kind of iconic song of the era, came from the primitive blues roots. And there's a lot of songs that have done that. Hard to
Hound
Handle,
Dog.
Hound Dog, yeah, Big Mama Thornton.
I think that's the one that we were talking about that got kind of down and dirty with the best of them. She
Uh,
some of her lyrics on stuff. The
yeah, she wrote some incredible stuff. If you ever get a chance to go on YouTube and look at Big Mama Thornton, some shit. That
Yeah.
is some shit.
Another thing I got too is there's a song by the probably the Yardbirds' biggest hit is called "Train Kept a Rollin'," and Aerosmith does that song off the Get Your Wings album, which when you're a young band like that, you do a lot of covers. Especially Aerosmith's always done covers. But I grew up with that song thinking it was a Yardbirds song, but it's older than that. It's like one of the old blues songs, and you hear Hound Dog and like the Lemon song with or the Led Zeppelin talks about squeeze my lemon till the juice runs down my leg. We all know what he's talking about. That's Robert Johnson. Traveling Riverside Blues, I guess, that came out. And I remember hearing that for the first time in 19 around when I really got into Led Zeppelin in the late 80s. Because when I really got into my metal phase, I went back and I still do this to this day. When I hear somebody and I hear somebody like Jimmy Page or somebody talk about an artist that inspired them, I try to go back and listen to that artist because I don't really listen to new music. I go back and listen to bands I didn't really give a chance to before. So that's what I do now. So a lot of that stuff I got from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, thinking it was the Yardbirds, and knowing Aerosmith did it. It's just, I mean, it's a great way to just discover stuff. Like I grew up listening to Rod Stewart, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Because that was the era and Hot Legs. But then again, I got his box set and I go back and listen to shit he did in the early 60s, like Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, which is another cover. So all this shit is just, I say shit is great. There's so much of a foundation on there that you'll never run out. And that's why, it's great when they put out their Long Live Rock. There's a song by Rainbow. It was Richie Blackmore's group after, Deep Purple he had with Ronnie James Dio. And he's got a song. I mean, they had a couple incidents with like Graham Bonnet and whatever, but they have a song. It's one of my favorites, like "Long Live Rock and Roll." And that's why they say rock is dead. A lot of it's new, but I think newer artists like Taylor Swift, and they're continuing that rock on because they're building on that stuff as this there. And us as Gen Xers and Boomers, I mean, we may not like it, but our parents didn't necessarily like the shit we listen to.
Well, yeah, it's always the case. It's always the case. One other name I will give, two names I will give people if they want to see the roots of rock and roll. There's a woman from, I don't know, maybe the 40s and 50s. Her name is Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was playing rock and roll back in the day, and she was just shredding on the guitar. A lot of rock stars look to her and go, Jesus Christ, she's great. If you look her up on YouTube. There's another guy, Arthur Big Boy Crudup. Arthur Big Boy Crudup. He was a musician too, and just his note, he wrote the song "That's All Right, Mama" for Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley's first hit. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the black blues. Um, and then each generation takes their inspiration and they interpret it a different way. They change some things like Elvis did and like everybody did. And you make a good point. You brought up Deep Purple and Richie Blackmore. When Deep Purple was out in the 70s, when I was young, they were hot. And then when they weren't, they formed other groups and super groups and stuff like that. There was a small grouping of very talented people, but it was weird back then. We didn't know the individuals like in Deep Purple, like we would know of groups now. They weren't. You might know the lead singer, but you may not know all the people that were in the group. But you just love the songs. So people become more educated about their groups and who's in their groups. Now you may have because you were kind of a group geek, but I wasn't. I like Smoke on the Water. I didn't give a fuck who sang it, but it's interesting. I want to tell you one experience I had in the 60s. There was the Byrds. You remember the Byrds? Okay. And the Byrds was another kind of super group in that they had a lot of people who went on to great fame.
Oh yeah.
The leader of the band, the lead singer, was Roger McGuinn. Now, Roger McGuinn was very talented. He hung out with all those people in California. He was part of a bunch of different groupings of people that would play together and stuff, but he was in the Byrds. And in about the 80s, I was doing some project and I had the opportunity to interview Roger McGuinn. So I'm thinking, cool. Now I know him from the 60s, long hair, wear rimmed
Yeah.
glasses, peace. So I go to this office and I'm sitting down and ready to walk in, and Roger McGuinn walks in. Counterculture guy, hippie of the 60s, guy playing rock and roll who everybody looked up to. He was a good looking guy, so he was very popular. I'm sitting there at the desk and he walks in, and I don't even realize it's him because he's in a three-piece suit, horn rimmed glasses, and the motherfucker's got an attitude. He does not want to be there. He does not want to talk to me or anybody else. And I sat down with him, this peace, love, and free love guy, and he was a fucking asshole. Now, I'm not blaming him for that because when you do a bunch of interviews and you deal with a bunch of assholes, you can turn yourself into an asshole. But I just thought that was so strange. Here's a guy that you thought was the epitome of counterculture. Guy comes in, I'm younger than he is, I'm in my 20s, and here's this guy. Fucking counterculture guy is now establishment.
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine that he's back in the day, we went to high school together. He played in a band. Him and his brother had who Sebastian Bach is from Skid Row with that big ass
Yeah,
hair that, he had that kind of hair and wore the leather jacket. And I hung out with him because, the, and he works for a company now that's, an insurance company, big company. And he was telling me he got to go to Boston on the jet. I'm like, man, you fucking sold out, dude. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, dude, you're a fucking suit now. He goes, no, I'm not. I go, you're flying on a fucking Lear jet, dude. You're a fucking suit. And this guy to this day doesn't like anything popular. Like I like Def Leppard and all these bands in the 80s, Motley,
yeah.
Metallica. He likes these bands like I'd never fucking heard of. I mean, he likes the Black Crowes because they were big for a while, we and stuff, but he's still like anti-culture stuff. And I was like, and it was just because, you're a sellout, yeah, it's like that. It's like almost he did the direct opposite of what George Carlin did. Because you remember when Carlin first came out and he was the,
Yeah.
wearing the
Had the
tie
suit,
and everything,
skinny tie.
fucking
Yeah.
full blown hippie to the day he fucking died. And I mean that yeah, that and when I was talking about that restaurant before we got there is Tony Paco's. It's in Toledo, Ohio, because that's where Jamie Farr, when he played Corporal Klinger, was from. And
Right.
it's Tony Paco's restaurant. It's a hot dog place and they have all these fucking hot dog buns. I mean, they're signed from shit people in the 30s that it's like, they've been dead longer than I've been alive. I'm 53.
Right.
I mean, they've been around since the Depression era. So I mean, I don't want to get blasted in the comments. Tony Paco's, thank you very much. It was great, but I ate so many damn hot dogs down here. I had the freaking Philly cheesesteak. I'm losing some, some rock and roll points there, but I do love me a good Philly cheesesteak.
Who
But
doesn't?
yeah, I always thought that too when you bring them up about how the peace, love, and all this stuff. I always thought that about Don Henley. I mean, I love Don Henley. He's from Texas. He's probably my favorite member of the Eagles. The dude, and I love his music. He talks about forgiveness and all this shit, but fucking him and Glenn Fry fucking. I mean, they went after Don Felder with a passion. They went after some of the other ones. So yeah, you'll sit there and preach that peace and love, and we need to get together, and you can be just the biggest prick there are. Doesn't have anything to do with your music, but I mean, if you preach that shit, you ought to practice it.
And I don't know if you remember this, but Don Henley, it's more appropriate to bring it up now given all that's happening. But Don Henley back in the day had a little trouble with some underage girls too. I don't know if you recall
Yep.
that.
Oh, I
I
do.
don't know that I don't know if he knows Jeffrey Epstein, but he had some problems. But that was typical. I mean, underage girls with rock
Oh yeah.
stars was pretty common. There was a story I heard about a woman out of Arkansas. She was going to be all these rock shows and she was a groupie and she was like 16 years old. She was such a groupie that Grand Funk Railroad did a song.
American band.
And in that song, they said, sweet, sweet Connie doing her act. She had the whole show, and that's a natural fact. Well, that woman actually exists. She just died a short time ago.
Yeah.
Connie, whatever her name is, but sweet, sweet Connie. And she sits and tells the stories about how when she's 14, 15, 16 years old, she's running off with all these big rock stars. And she wasn't the only one. Back in the 70s and 80s, that was kind of a culture of young girls as groupies. Some were of age, a lot of them weren't, but you didn't hear the people being upset about it. It just was kind of hidden. We don't talk about that stuff. Can you imagine if that were going on today?
Can you
Fucking
imagine the
cancel culture would
cameras?
go crazy. Yeah.
The cameras? Yeah, there was a bunch of groupies too that made the plaster cast. I don't know if she was part of them.
Cynthia
Kiss,
Plaster cast, I think.
yeah, Kiss has a song called Plaster Caster, which talks about that. And it's like, I mean, I remember I mean, I was, I mean, when I hear that shit in the song behind it, I'm like, That's definitely, I mean, we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have much to do. That's what Gene Simmons always said. I didn't do drugs or smoke. I just fucked a lot of groupies. I mean, that's what they did. You think about it, they're
Yeah.
in bumfuck Idaho or something. They got nothing to do. That's what they did. A lot of these guys that didn't do drugs, like, Gene and Ted Nugent, I mean, they were addicted to sex. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of that shit they'd be in jail for now, like you said.
Well, Cynthia Plastercaster, for those people that are too young and don't know who this was somebody in the 60s, maybe the 70s too. This was a woman whose hobby was to bring these rock stars in and using plaster would cast their penis. And to this day, I think this woman has a room full of rock star plaster cast penis. Who the fuck thinks of that? Why would you even consider that? But now everybody's going, well, that's kind of cool. Let's see Alice Cooper's dick. It's just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and yeah, yeah, and I remember, and I remember, and I rem you just, I mean, you listen to, and it's funny because here I am when I'm a kid and I'm listening, I say kid because I kind of really got into like hard rock and Kiss and Aerosmith in the 70s because, they were a little bit before my time. And here I am listening to a song called Plaster Caster, and I'm kind of like, oh shit. But why am I fucking surprised? The fucking album's called Love Gun. I mean, it's like, hello, and then it's like, and he got that from a Led Zeppelin song. I got you in the sights of my love gun. That's, I mean, like we said, we got on that shit. But can you imagine if four freaks like this, dressing, mime makeup, as some people call it, release an album called Love Gun? I mean, today? I mean, people lose their shit over, just anything nowadays. I mean, it was definitely, I think social media is kind of, you get people on there that, they try to shame the previous generations and all this stuff, and they want to cancel shit. I mean, it's like, I get it. If it's not for you, fucking move on. If I'm not the biggest, Pink Floyd fan in the world. Do I think they
I'm not
suck?
doing
It's like Roger Waters. And he just did something, came out, and Jack Osborne said it. He goes, well, I was never an Ozzy fan, but he was ridiculous, and I mean, right after he died, and Jack Osborne, his son, got on there and said, well, my dad always thought you were a meow word, and that just proves you're right. And I get that, I mean, it's like, if you don't like something, shut up about it. I never thought that Pink Floyd was nonsense. I've never been a pothead, into psychedelics. That's your thing, that's your thing. But obviously Pink Floyd doesn't suck. They're just not my thing because they've sold millions of albums. There's if there's an audience for anything, I mean, there's a lot of bands out there that I don't like, but I still respect because they've made it. I was never a big Rush fan. I was never a big, Pink Floyd fan, but there's obviously a face for that. I always thought
it.
Nirvana from Gen X is the most overrated band, one of the most overrated bands. I still like their shit. I don't think they suck. I get a lot of shit about, oh, Kiss sucks, Metallica sold out. I mean, everybody's going to have a fucking opinion. And I think that, I try not to be that guy where I go in there and I try to shame somebody for liking something. I mean, you
No,
can
I've
like
never
something and
I've never been one of those people that you could say, well, he just likes metal or he likes punk or he
yeah,
likes R&B because I like good songs, you know.
yeah.
Um, I don't I wouldn't say I'm a heavy metal fan, but I do like Led Zeppelin. I do like Deep Purple. And I because I like some of the songs. But I also will sit and listen to the Little River Band singing
Yeah.
Reminiscing because it came out when I was 17, 18 years old. So it was part of my soundtrack, if you will. I like good songs. That's why there are some country songs I like. There are some, there are many not R, I love R&B, so all of them are good, but there are some rap songs I even liked when I was younger. I don't pay attention to music as much as I did, so I can't say I have favorite songs. Um, but there are good artists and there is good music and there's some shitty artists and shitty music. So by saying I love metal, that means I love all metal. And there was a lot of shitty metal bands and a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
shitty
Oh
hair
yeah.
bands
I
too. But if you talk about Poison, I was okay with some of the stuff that Poison did.
yeah.
But some of the others I just don't get. You know, I grew up in the 70s, so in the late 70s you had the occurrence of punk music. Okay. And it really kind of took off. And I never understood it because, they go, oh, the Ramones are the greatest band ever. The Ramones are cool, but I don't get it. It was a bunch of people who legitimately acknowledged we don't know how to play instruments. We're just going to go up there and make noise and scream. Now, I sound like an old man saying that, but I was 17, 18, 19 when it was coming out, and I felt that way at the point. And it just goes to show that music isn't always about music, it's about attitude and
Yeah.
message. And that's why punk music was able to take off the way it did. People were kind of anti establishment, a little pissed off at the world, and this gave them a way to vent that out.
That's how grunge was too. When grunge started out, you
Yeah,
had all the overabundance of hair bands. Even I kind of got sick of it. But when grunge kind of took over, there were a few bands like Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, that they were great bands. Nirvana, I think they were at the right place at the right time. Pearl Jam, they
yeah,
were good. But you have that died out too. It's like punk died out, and like, oh, punk never died. Oh, bullshit. I mean, the Sex Pistols
it
were
did.
awful. I just said I don't say bands are awful. Sex Pistols were awful.
Yeah.
Ramones, I kind of
I think
dig.
they meant to be. I think they're meant to be
Yeah,
awful, though. That was the point.
yeah, and yeah, Johnny Rotten is he's just a dick, man. I mean,
He's
he talked
still a
about his own
dick.
bad about his own mom. I mean, they have a song called "Anarchy in the UK" about him being an antichrist and all this stuff. And that song by them sucks. I've heard Motley Crue sing it. I've heard Megadeth sing it. Both versions suck. It's just a
Yeah.
horrible. I mean, but that's me. Green Day, who I love, and Green Day, who are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, are my age. That is probably the best punk band I got. They got stuff like, their first album was great because grunge was over, and here they were more rock punk when the height of Nirvana. I dug them. They have a song called American Idiot, which ruffles the right people the wrong way. So if you don't know what that is, it's a great song. And they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm like, shit, these guys are my age. But yeah, talking about stories, you talk about hair bands and stuff. My first concert was Whitesnake. It was in 1990, and there was a band called Bad English, which was who's that guy John White who had that song "Missing You." He was he in
John Waite.
what
John
was
Waite.
what's wait what was he also in? He was also in
The
was there was some
Babies.
the Babies, yes, and part of Journey. Who Journey's a band I've never liked. I didn't like them with Steve Perry. They weren't for me. That I'm
Yeah.
not a big Journey fan. I do like some Journey songs, like you. But I got to
Right.
go meet Whitesnake. I got to go meet Whitesnake, and it was my first concert. I was a junior in high school, and my buddy goes, "Well, don't get a ticket because my mom knows Tawny Katane." And every Gen Xer and probably most boomers know who Tawny Katane was. She's the babe that was on married to David Coverdale, who was on the redhead on the car that pretty much
Right.
helped put them on the map. So she came backstage, and it was so cool because I always saw this guy I went to high school with. I didn't know him. We just say hi to each other, but he was always backstage. I'm like, fucker's always at back. I don't know how he does it and stuff. Probably knew somebody. She literally came and got the four of us, five of us. It was this couple that knew her and me and my two buddies and took us back there. And that guy's mouth just dropped. I mean, Tawny Katane came and got us.
That's
We hung
incredible.
out with her. She was so cool. We sit there and talked, and she actually talked to us. Here we are, three ginky teenagers, probably oogling, the hottest chick in the world at the time, and she was cool. David Cover was cool, but the British men have all that hair. They look so big on TV, but they're short. I can see the top of Coverdale's head.
Wow.
And Coverdale at the time had White Snake. They broke huge in '87, but a lot of their stuff. But I don't know if you knew this, but Coverdale was in Deep Purple.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was in Purple. He actually did. They actually did an album called the Purple Album, which came out around 72, 73. They did like three albums together with John Lord was the keyboardist and stuff and all them. But he was in Purple for a while. Then he went and started Whitesnake, in the 70s or whatever. And
Right.
Coverdale's always been one of my favorite ones because he mimics Plant. He's just if you hear Still of the Night, Plant did that 20 years later in Zeppelin, a whole lot of love. But they were the coolest people. And I just had, what are the pictures? It's like, well, it was 1990. I didn't have any fucking pictures, which you had disposable cameras, I think of. But I got a shirt that's all yellow now. It's a white shirt. I have it signed by Tawny Katane. I didn't want Coverdale's. I just wanted her autograph. But Steve Vai was in the band. I mean, I remember Steve Vai. He's a great guitar player. Rudy Sarzo, who played with Ozzy, was in Quiet Riot, and Adrian Vandenberg was a band called Vandenberg, which was kind of a hair metal band. But I remember David Coverdale talking about how Whitesnake kind of became the UN. He had all these players that he recorded this album, the '87 album, then fired everybody. And he fired everybody because they weren't pretty enough. I mean, that's what he
Wow.
did. John Sykes is a guitar player. I forget who John, I think John Sykes played in Thin Lizzy there at the end. He's a great guitar player. He recently died last year. He had a band called Blue Murder, but they were a band, and he played with Carmen Appice, who was it with, he played with Rod Stewart. He played with Ozzy, great drummer. Him and his brother, Carmine and, whatever. But yeah, I got the boomer on something. He didn't know who the David Coverdale was, and because he probably
I
checked out by
didn't.
now. That was kind of the early '70s. They were kind of going more of a metal way anyway. And hell, Deep Purple's still around. They play without Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore, he likes to do like medieval music. Like he's been offered a lot of money to come back, but he does like that. You ever been to a Renaissance festival? He does that kind of shit. I mean, that's his thing. That's what he wants to do. Hey, more power to him.
Can we do a little bit of a side now that you brought up a Renaissance festival? I got to tell a story. I
Sure.
haven't been I haven't been to a Renaissance festival in 35 years, 38 years. And you know why I haven't been to a Renaissance festival? Here in Minnesota, we have a Renaissance festival every year. And at
I'm
this
here.
Renaissance festival, I don't know if they go around to other cities or not, there was this comedy team, Puke and Snot. And they'd walk around in the garb and they would give people shit, you know? They would give people shit. Um, so we're walking around, we're young. My wife's 8 months pregnant and she's big. And she's so put on so much weight she can't wear her wedding ring anymore. And we're
Oh
walking
wow.
around, and Puke and Snot see that she's pregnant, very pregnant, and doesn't have a wedding ring. They walk up to my wife, they grab her hand, raise it in the air, and they say, "Ladies and gentlemen, the town whore."
Oh wow.
I laughed. My wife was not happy about me laughing about it, and she refuses to go back to the Renaissance Festival ever since. Guess I can't blame her. I mean, when you got a woman in her 8 month or ninth month of pregnancy, and it's August and it's fucking hot, and some clown dressed in weird clothes calls you the town whore, you see why you might want to take offense to that.
I never understood the Renaissance Festival. They have them down here too. And I never got that celebration of some of the worst times to be alive. I mean, what was the plague was around and the Dark Ages. I mean, hell, she's lucky she wasn't back then. They would have fucking put a scarlet letter on her or stoned her to death. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, God, and can you imagine the BO and just hygiene? But
Yeah,
you know
I,
what?
I,
People kept it fucking. The population kept it going. That didn't stop them.
that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
It's amazing when you were talking about this Carmen Apiece. I looked it up online, what he was in because I'd heard his name and I thought he was in the places you suggested. He was in a number of bands, but you
yeah,
know what the band he started out with? Vanilla Fudge, which
yeah.
you probably don't even know, but it was
I
deep in
know.
the '60s. We had some of these '60s crazy psychedelic bands ending up in '70s rock and roll bands, and who knows whatever the hell else they've been doing. Um, I had occasion last year to go to California, and uh, uh, we decided to drive around Laurel Canyon, which in the '70s was kind of a hotbed for the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt and all those people. We went to the store that they always go to. We saw the houses. Um, what's interesting is that every time there's a new genre or a new style of music coming out, it always centers around a certain area. We had it in Minnesota during the '80s with Prince and the time and all that stuff. You had it in Seattle with the grunge, and then you had back in the '70s this Laurel Canyon thing. I mean, a lot of people don't understand the Eagles were basically following around to a certain extent and even backing up Linda Ronstadt for a certain amount of time. Linda Ronstadt was the star, and she
Yep,
kind of helped them out to get to
yep.
where they were. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's some Linda Ronstadt that she does like Desperado. I mean that's a great song that Henley sings, but I mean hearing her sing that and you talk about somebody who had a career. I mean, God, Linda Ronstadt. You talk
Yeah.
about, I mean, yeah, granted, Granted, when I mean, I remember her growing up listening to her, but I remember when she started doing that stuff with Ron Neville, like that somewhere out there in the 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
that was kind of Broadway, Linda. She'd kind of gotten past
Yeah.
her roots, her rock and roll roots. She kind of wouldn't, I mean, we all mature.
She was getting
I mean,
older. Yeah.
yeah, AC/DC still puts out the same album and it works for them. It's still great and they're on their 70. But I mean, people mature, and I think a lot of people you gotta progress. I mean, Metallica did that. They weren't, they don't play as fast as they did when they were 20 something. Kiss and the Stones, they did disco. Rod Stewart did disco. You know what? It saved their
Absolutely.
ass.
Yeah.
They ragged on that a couple years earlier, but I think Stones have wrote some of the best. I love their disco shit. I mean, it just, as fucked up as they were, you ever watch the Miss You video? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Even Charlie Watts is fucked up, and he was the most straight arrowed guy in the band. But that worked for them. I mean, that you got to progress. And there's some bands that make the same album kind of over and over. But I think as getting older, we talk about politically that you may not be as conservative as you were when you were a kid, or as liberal as you were a kid. I mean, we all change, and that's getting
Oh
kind of
yeah.
deep here. But that's why a lot of relationships don't work, is you're not the same person you were when you're married. And that's what, it's like I heard Paul Stanley say that one time about, well, what happened to the other two guys? Well, it's like a four-way marriage. Nowadays, two-way marriages don't work. Can you imagine four?
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just it's fucking just, it's relationships, Why don't, it could be about money. It could be about you just, you're tired of it, and
Yeah.
talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, one of the things that they did, I don't know if we were online, we were recording this, but they're talking about Bon Jovi, how they have their own wing like in the top. And they're recent, but they're more Gen X, and they're
Yeah.
more a band that made it. But there's a lot, I mean, that band's been around for a while, but bands, kind of started, it's always been that way where you have one key guy and the rest are paid musicians. And we talked about, like you were talking about with the time, how they were a lot of them were just paid musicians, and that same thing evidently happened to Bon Jovi. And I think Bon Jovi was probably bigger than the time, and they were probably making more
Oh
money.
yeah.
But you had Richie Sambora, who is the second coming of Eric Clapton, if you ask me. I mean, a lot of that stuff he plays is like Clapton. He even plays a Fender. But there was a time when they were touring and he just didn't show up. He just
Yeah.
they were there, they had this show going on. But a lot of these bands, you got to realize too that it's not like it's these bands have become more corporate than anything. They're businesses, and people have always said, well, Kiss is a brand, not a band. Yeah, but there's a lot of those bands that they have all these, crew, and there's like a business that people work on them. And if you don't show up, you don't show up. That's why you see these bands continuing without any lead singers, without the same any original members. Foreigner at one time, I think that Lou Graham's back with them, but it was Mick Jones, and sometimes he didn't play. They had different guys, and you don't show up. It's not just you're playing a club gig and the band's getting paid and you set your own shit up. These are massive corporations. You don't show up, people don't get paid.
I saw that Lou Graham was back with Foreigner, and great singer. Got a lot of great
Was.
memories
Yeah.
of the great song. I saw him. He's not in good shape. I don't know how
Yeah.
he sounds today. The saddest thing I saw, I showed it to my wife. Saw it on TikTok. There was an old rock singer that was standing on stage, and all he could do is lift one foot and lift the other foot, lift the other foot, and move his hands a little bit. And what was so sad about it is who it was.
Was it Frankie Valley?
No, I saw that one too. That is pitiful, but that guy's 150. This guy's probably 80, 81. Not that that's any better, but Roger Daltrey.
Really?
Roger Daltrey. Can you imagine, thinking back to The Who and his shirt off and masculine and bouncing around and bounding around? He is relegated to standing in the middle of the stage, lifting a foot, and
Wow.
moving his hands a little bit. Now, I'm not shaming him for that, but I gotta think he's made enough money. Fucking relax. Are you that attached to standing in front of a crowd that you'll make a fool out of yourself to do it? Now I know all the fool people that love him will love him no matter what, but Jesus Christ, give it a rest.
Yeah, and they fired Ringo's son, who was their drummer, for supposedly not doing a good job. And he's been, I didn't know Ringo had a son that was a drummer, that, I mean, but this is the same guy that I hope I die before I get old. I mean, what
Yeah,
would, 20-year-old Roger Daltrey think about 81-year-old Roger Daltrey? Hell, they
exactly.
had that thing with, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Scorpions. They've been around forever.
Yeah.
And they're doing a residency in Vegas. And I've just heard, I had my aunt who's very conservative. My mom was telling me that she went to go see Scorpions. I go, Lori? Scorpions? I mean, and because I've seen Scorpions and they were good. They had a good run, but they've been around since the 60s. They're from Germany. They're one of the oldest bands. Klaus Meinen, Google it if you don't know who he is. He was up there doing the same thing. He looked like Frankie Valli. I mean, he
Yeah.
literally looked and well, he's had health problems. Well, he's 80 fucking one. Yeah, 80, 81. Of course he is. Vince Neil from Motley Crue, who's never been a great singer. He's what you call a studio singer. He looked good and he had a good voice on, before, auto tune.
Yeah.
He's probably about 6 or 7 years older than me. He's 50, maybe 59. And he was up there doing the same thing. And it's like, you look at that and it's like, it's time to give up. Hell, Kiss was doing that. They did their farewell tour in 2019 and I got tickets and COVID hit. So they were on the thing for like 3 more years. And they always accused Paul Stanley of doing the backing tracks. I go, well, if those are fucking backing tracks, he ain't getting his money's worth. Because I
Yeah.
mean, you hear some of them, and then you look at somebody like Mick Jagger. I mean, yeah, the guy had some heart problems, but that motherfucker is timeless. And Mick Jagger is not. He's never been Robert Plant singing. He fit the Stones good. Keith
Right.
Richards.
Yeah. How does
You
that
think,
happen?
huh?
How does that happen that they
Well,
still, I mean,
Keith.
they aren't what they used to be, but they still can kind of play the role.
Well, I think look at Sammy Hagar. That motherfucker's
Yeah.
76 years old. I saw him 2 or 3 years ago. Dude's kicking ass still. I mean, he's better than people half his age. But then
Yeah.
again, you have people that they want to get Zeppelin back together. Robert Plant ain't doing it because he's singing with Alison Krauss now, almost folk music. He doesn't want to, he doesn't have that whole lot of love range anymore. And I'm glad. I don't want to see that. I was
No.
glad Kiss was going away because I don't want to see it more. Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, I give him credit because when he knew he couldn't do it, he fucking done. He says, I'm done. We may do one more concert. They were coming here. I had tickets. Them and the Black Crowes, two of my favorite bands. Like, I'll see them one more time. And I never thought Aerosmith was that great because they were kind of boring in concert. But I mean, still Aerosmith one more time. But he
Yeah, but
gave it up. A
in a
lot of bands
sense,
don't do that.
they were more poppy,
Yeah,
hard rock pop, and
yeah.
I liked a lot of their songs. I did, but I never thought of them as a Led Zeppelin level hard rock
No,
band.
they're probably they're one of America's greatest rock bands because I mean I think just the sales alone, I mean, and reinventing yourself and becoming back in the 80s being bigger than ever. I mean
Yeah,
80s Aerosmith was probably bigger than 70s Aerosmith. Not better, bigger. But I mean it gave a lot of Gen Xers like me who didn't really know them because I mean my mom didn't listen to Aerosmith. I mean my dad listened to Don Williams, so that's the kind of stuff I grew up on. But I learned about Aerosmith and Kiss because my parents had listened to them in the 80s, back when, took the makeup off and you actually had to make, decent songs. So, I mean, yeah. Yeah, to me, we were talking about the 70s and 80s. I mean, to me it runs together, the 70s and 80s, because a lot of the bands
kind
I
of
listened
does.
to in
Yeah.
the 70s were in the 80s, Rod Stewart, Stones, and all that stuff. So it kind of comes together for me. But that's as a Gen Xer, so
Well, it's amazing how differently you look at music. In the 70s, I was in my teens, I was partying, I was getting crazy.
yeah.
Early 80s, kind of the same thing. But then in 83, I get married and then I ultimately have kids. So the way I view and consume music is different. I'm still young, so I still want to hear the Michael Jacksons and
Yeah.
Princes, but it's not the same. It's not, I'm getting drunk and I'm listening to Michael Jackson. It wasn't that wasn't the case. So I think the way people view music depends on, I think when you first become most exposed is in your early to late teens, and that is kind of your music wherever that happened to show up. You, it was you in the 90s, was it?
Me?
Yeah.
No, me, I mean 80s, probably 80s more. The
Okay.
90s I kind of checked out on rock because grunge took over. I wasn't a big fan then. I am now though.
Yeah, yeah. I was mostly 70s, so when the 80s were there, it was okay for a while. Michael Jackson, Prince, I liked it. But when the 90s hit, I was kind of checked out at that point. And you talk about grunge music. Um, you know, like Nirvana. That's all I ever heard about Nirvana. And
Yeah.
I saw Nirvana. I thought, yeah, they're okay.
They're
But I
okay.
was never enthralled and never understood why people worship this band. And probably largely had to do with my age and what I was used to and what I was seeing now. And these young kids were now seeing this for the first time, and that's their shit.
Yeah, the 80s, the 70s, I remember as a child. I mean, my first album I ever bought was the Grease soundtrack, and that was mostly because of Olivia.
Yeah, well,
She
yeah,
was my first crush, and her and Jessica Lange and King Kong, that throws you way back there. The
yep,
Yeah, the 80s were it, and a lot of those metal bands that you probably the hair bands or think are horrible, I probably loved. And and I loved everything from like Poison. I loved all the way to Slayer. I mean, I like the heavy shit too, because I was a freaking testosterone filled kid. It's
yeah,
like get your aggression out, and I didn't, and I've never been a big drinker and stuff like that. But a lot of that music, a lot of it in the 80s were like self-help. What the 80s way of 80s doing is like you release a good rockin' track, then you put a ballad out and then you go back to the rock. I mean, all those rock bands had that ballad, and it probably started with Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue, and you
yeah,
had all those because they had to get the chicks in there too. So that was a big motivator as well.
absolutely. Looks like we're
Well,
coming to the end here.
yeah, we think we are, sir. I don't know if the audience can take much more of this wisdom that we keep doing, but it's been great on here, Mike. I've enjoyed
Well,
the conversation as always.
we'll be back. We're going to try to do this once a week just to kind of take a break from the other bullshit. I welcome it and appreciate it because you can only talk about shit so much, and then you need to at least take a break, and that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. Well, we thank everybody for joining us, and like Mike said, we'll see you down the line.